Hello, my name is Philip McDonald, and I'm a Special Collections Librarian here at NC State University Libraries.
And my name is Taylor Wolford. I am also a Special Collections Librarian at NC State University Libraries. And today we are dying to be here. You may have noticed we are in a completely different space. We are in the Public Sciences Lab on campus. So thank you to the Public Sciences staff for allowing us to use your lab for the day. And what we're doing today, Phil, do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, we're going to do a couple different natural dyes with fabrics. We're going to do sumac, turmeric, and cinnamon.
Yeah.
And we're going to do some of the pre-process right now to get the fabric ready for dyeing. So the first thing we're going to do is prep the cotton and prep the fibers by scouring. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes. So the first step in dyeing, the technique we're doing today is called natural dyeing, meaning we're not using really harsh chemicals or synthetic dyes to dye our materials. So the first step in that is actually scouring the materials. So we're using cotton fabric today, and to scour it, that basically means you are cleaning the fabric to prepare it for the dyeing process so that the dye could absorb a little bit better when you get started.
Perfect.
Okay.
So we got the pot of water. You start with a pot of water.
Mm-hmm.
And then, is it, oh, it is on. Is it on? Yes.
It's on. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Put it on high. Let me see.
I mean, I feel like at this point we just need to wait for the water to
Yeah, now we're just waiting for the water to boil, but we'll make sure to record
Mm-hmm.
everything, so.
Yes. So while we're waiting for the water to boil, we can talk a little bit about how this idea formed,
Yeah.
how our idea formed to get this started. So Phil and I think we were doing either a textiles unboxing, I think, yeah, or a bees unboxing with the libraries. And somebody had posted in our chat that they would be interested in us using some of the dyeing recipes that we were talking about in the unboxing. And so that's why we're here today.
Yeah.
What was your experience like trying to replicate these dyes at home?
Fun. I mean, it was super fun. I'm glad that I'm in a more lab setting, so we have a little bit more control on the environment. It was super hot in the kitchen and
Yeah.
just like tons of steam everywhere. So hopefully this will be a little bit more straightforward and nicer. But yeah, and it was our first unboxing that it came from. It was the textiles, and then we used some of the materials that we talked about in the video were like these 19th century like textbooks, or some of them were workbooks from students in textiles here at State, and so some of them had like used natural dyes in order to dye the fabric. So
Right.
yeah, so
Yeah.
this is, how long has it been?
It's been at least a year.
At least a year. So this unboxing has been a year in the making, you could say.
Yeah, and another, while we're waiting for this water to boil, it's taking its time.
It's not plugged in.
No, no.
So first thing you do with anything, make sure the hot plate's plugged in.
Yeah.
So now that we have that, we can move forward.
Yeah.
And we already measured out our washing soda, 35 grams, and so, but we wait till it's boiling to add it, and then wait for it to kind of bubble up, and then it's good to go.
Yeah. Something to note is that you can dye natural fabrics with natural dyes without doing sort of these preliminary steps. Some cultures, like in early Indian medicine, did not use these steps, but it does help the dye adhere a little bit better for the longevity of the fabric and the dye, so that's why we're doing it today. But primarily in early dyeing practices, they did not do all of these steps to prepare the fabric before dyeing.
I'll be honest, when I did this at home, I did not do these steps. So I'm interested to see how it's different, the same, if it's necessary. Probably, like you were saying, though, with longevity, like maybe in like a year or two, we would know like the difference between the scoured and unscoured
over the long
fabric.
term.
Yeah. So the water's almost at a frolicking boil, and so we go ahead and add.
Yes, so we've pre-measured out 35 grams of washing soda, and this is going to clean the fabric before we dye it. So we have our water, half of the pot is filled with water, just water, and we're gonna go ahead and put in the washing soda and give it a little mixy-mixy. Okay. Give the washing soda just a little bit of time to incorporate with the liquid. Another suggestion we have, full disclaimer, you should probably have gloves and a lid for your pot so that the chemicals don't bother your eyes too much. So after that, when the bubbles have sort of subsided and you've turned it back down to a simmer, you can go ahead and put in the fabric that you will be working with. So
How many strips do you want to put in?
we can just put in one.
One, that's what I thought.
Yeah. You might need more washing soda depending on how much fabric you're trying to dye, right?
Mhm.
So like it's per weight fabric, so you can measure out about 10 to 20% of washing soda per however many grams of fabric you have.
The cloth, yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
And that's how we measured it. Obviously, we're working with a tiny, tiny strip.
Yes.
So you're going to stir the fabric every 15 minutes or so to make sure that it's adequately scoured or cleaned. And then finally, when it's done and it's been simmering for about an hour or two, you can take it out of the pot and wash it with cold water. And it'll be ready for the next step. So yeah, we can just come back. Let's
Take a gander.
Yes, let's take a gander inside of the pot. It has been scouring for a couple minutes now. Really like less than a minute actually.
Less than a minute, but it's already
And-
like, the water's already turning like brownish and gray, like
Yes.
it was dirty. And these are fresh Kirkland cotton tees, so I'm
Right.
very surprised.
Well, I think what this demonstrates is the importance of cleaning your fabric prior to dyeing because in the manufacturing process
Mhm.
and shipping and transportation and all of that, the fabrics, especially natural fibers, pick up a lot of dust and dirt, and they just accumulate a lot of brown stuff, as you can see. So this is really important to get all of that out. And when you're done with the scouring process after about an hour or two, probably your water will be mostly brown at that point.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So after we have scoured, we're going to move on next to the mordant process.
So now we're gonna do the mordant,
Mm-hmm.
and this is another fixative to help retain the color from the natural dyes. And so we were using alum,
Yes,
Right?
alum. Yes,
Okay.
it's alum.
and this is from the grocery store. We were able to get this from the grocery store. Super not difficult to find. And so we cleaned the previous container. We're just using a new one, and so we're getting it up to heat, and then we're going to. Do you think it's hot enough to go ahead and stir in?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we filled it up just a little bit, enough to submerge the cloth. And then we measured out a tablespoon of alum to put in, or alum, however you say it.
YouTube it.
Yes.
You'll find out.
And a fixative, or mordant, as they call it, is really important because it helps the dye adhere to the recently scoured fabric better. You can, with any of our recipes today, skip the scouring and the mordant step, right?
Yeah.
And still have a vibrant result. We tested out some fabrics without doing these steps, and they worked really great,
Yeah.
which we will show later. But this does help the dye really stick to the fabric, and it's a great step in the process if you are interested in using natural dyes.
Perfect. And you can use this for berries, but if there are other like natural dyes, you can also use vinegar in this step, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you are using, if you're using like spices or
Like a turmeric.
or a cinnamon, you can use alum. You can also use salts. Now, if you're using berries or like onion skins or avocado pits, which you can also dye with, you can use vinegar as your mordant fixative.
Yeah.
Chemical. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay. It looks like it's starting to boil.
And you want to dissolve completely, right?
Yes, you want it to dissolve completely before you put the mixture in, just so it distributes evenly around the cloth. It doesn't like fix onto certain points of it.
Cool.
So after your pot has reached a full boil, you can go ahead and put the fabric into the pot and give it a mix. And then next, we will move into the next part of the process, which is actually applying natural dyes to your prepared fabrics.
The real stuff.
Yes.
So we're gonna do our first dye, and so we boiled 4 cups of water, and they're now at a royal. And then we're gonna add about a quarter of a cup of sumac. You
Yep.
want to stir it in?
I will go ahead and stir this.
and then you let it simmer for a little bit, and then you let it simmer for about an hour.
Yep, there we go. We're going to expedite the process
Yes.
a little bit. So typically you would leave this sumac in at a simmer. You can turn down your heat for about an hour, hour and a half. And then you put in some vinegar, which Phil is going to put in next before we put in the fabric. And this also just helps the fabric, the dye adhere to the fabric a little better. And I can go ahead and give this a mix before we put
Concentrates the
in.
color, deepens it.
Okay, there you go.
And then you pop in the cloth.
Yep, and then you can go ahead sporadically while this is simmering, go ahead and mix it so the dye goes on more evenly. There is another way you can do this in which you bundle all of the spice into like a cheesecloth. And you put it in here at this point so that the spices don't sort of stick to the fabric. But you can also, when you're done with the dyeing process,
Like
wash it off with
yeah.
cool water and hang it to dry, and that'll remove all the spices as well. So sumac is native to western North Carolina, which is really cool. Disclaimer, there is a poisonous strain of sumac, so do not use the white berries on the bushes that you can find in western North Carolina. That's not the right sumac. But for our purposes, we just went to the store and bought a bag of sumac for like $2.99. It's pretty easily accessible at your grocery store, just like everything else we're using today, which is great. And then when you are done with your dye, you can keep all of the dyes that we've prepared today. This is what it's going to look like in the little containers there. This is sumac dye, and you'll see it's going to be a lot lighter than this depending on how strong you make it, but generally speaking, it'll be this sort of like pink reddish hue.
Yeah.
And then, like we said, you go ahead and wash this with cold water, hang it to dry, and then Phil has an example of what it looks like when it is completely done.
It's a lovely salmon.
It
I would
is.
say.
Yeah, I really like it. It's a pale, pale pink. If you use sumac berries, which we had also talked about, if we could locate them, it would be more concentrated and it would be closer to like red.
Yeah.
But it is a really pretty like pale pink. I'm not sure if it's showing up on the camera, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's already, this is what, like 5 minutes? Less than 5 minutes, and it's already kind of working some of its magic.
Yeah, so this is about, it's been a couple minutes, like you said, yeah, and you can already see it starting to turn a little pink. You can also cool off this liquid and leave it in overnight for a longer dye. But as you can see, it turns this really pretty pink color, and that is what the sumac dye has done to our white fabric.
Yeah, it'd be perfect for like a summer vacation color. Yeah. So now we're going to do turmeric, which is for your yellows and lovely colors like that. And so now we got a pot of water boiling, and we're going to just like sprinkle the turmeric in.
This is about 2 tablespoons of turmeric. You can add more if you want a more vibrant color, and depending on how long you're going to let it steep for. But we don't really have that much fabric to dye for our test, so 2 tablespoons is about enough. You can go ahead and mix it. And you can honestly, turmeric is such a strong dye, as you can tell by the color of this wooden spoon, that you can just put the cloth right in and it should dye fairly quickly. Here we go. Yep, it's already starting. You can go ahead and mix it. You can see.
It's a lovely like mustard,
Yeah,
which I think could be a spring or a fall color.
Yep, and see, it's already retained a pretty significant like mustard yellow, orangey color. It's really beautiful. This is again another thing, another dyeing recipe that's really important in ancient Indian medicine. Turmeric as a spice is believed to have like anti-inflammatory properties. So dyeing fabrics like this and then putting it on your body, that in some practices believe that it can also help with inflammation or lethargy or anything that might be ailing you. So that's a really interesting thing to think about, is like dyes and how they can help you physiologically.
Yeah.
So that's one benefit to these sort of more natural dyes. And Phil has over there some of our pre-prepared dyes. So we replicated this process at home, and we did a t-shirt this time, and this is how vibrant it comes out when it's fully dried. So you'll take the cloth out and you'll wash it in cool water again, and then I would definitely recommend air drying this. I put it in my washer and then my dryer, and now both are stained yellow. Like the
Don't
spoon.
do that.
Don't do that. But you can air dry these. Definitely don't recommend air drying them in direct sunlight because that will bleach the color right out. It'll be completely light pale yellow to white again. As I told you, I put another one of those t-shirts out in direct sunlight and it is now white. So turmeric reacts very differently in sunlight, especially on a dye form. So that being said, we can move on to our next dye, which is cinnamon.
So now we're going on to cinnamon for reds and browns. So we have some boiling water, and I'm adding about a quarter of a cup of cinnamon.
And you're going to want to mix this. Cinnamon is a little bit hydroponic, meaning it does not fully soak into the water. So you're going to want to mix it pretty thoroughly in comparison to, I would say, some of the other spices we've used today.
And if you want to find out what that would do to you, just Google cinnamon challenge, and then you'll find out.
Yeah. So you're going to let this simmer. How long would we recommend this
for? About an hour.
About an hour, yeah.
Similar to the sumac.
Yeah, let it simmer for about an hour. And again, this just kind of helps the spice absorb into the water so it can be more evenly distributed on the cloth. We're going to go ahead and put the cloth in now and give it a little bit of time and see how much dye we can get on the fabric in a couple minutes.
This one definitely smells the best.
It does.
I do love the smell of turmeric, but the cinnamon just, especially for the fall.
Christmas.
Yeah, Christmas, holidays.
So now that the dye has been soaking a little bit in with the fabric, Phil's going to mix it around a little bit just to make sure that it's getting all of the cloth saturated. We want to talk a little bit about the history of cinnamon. So cinnamon in ancient times was known to come from India and later from present-day Sri Lanka. It was one of the most sought-after spices in the ancient world. Cinnamon was like the equivalent of gold in ancient Egypt because it was so expensive and hard to obtain and transport from India to the rest of the world. So by the time it made its way to ancient Egypt, it was being used as a dye for fabrics. It was also being used for cosmetics, which is really cool. And lastly, it had been used for medicine and like medical properties. And it was also used for pottery because it could stain the different the materials that they used for their pottery.
Cool.
So cinnamon, as well as the turmeric and the sumac, have a lot of different applications in cultures across the world. And as you can see, it has already, after about 5 minutes or so, started to give the cloth a really nice, like tannish brown color with a little bit of red, I would say.
I know, yeah. It smells fantastic in here too.
It smells great.
I wish we could do smell-o-vision or something.
Yeah. So that is it today for our stream. Thank you for joining us today in the Public Sciences Lab in our nice space. Please join us next for a live panel discussion of the recipe book that we got a lot of these recipes from. We will bring that out, show it, and we will also have a live discussion about some of our failures and some of the things we learned dyeing at home and in the lab.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.